Alright, welcome back. Tutorial number 3. I got a little ahead of myself in the last one. At the end of the last one, I said we were going to be making the plane move, which is actually a lie. In this tutorial, we're actually going to be placing the islands onto our background first, and then in the next tutorial, we'll make the plane move. So let's get started. Now what we need to do is, as you see, we have made ourselves 3 island sprites. To make these into objects so that they move, we need to create new objects, and there's 3 ways you can do that. You can click on the blue ball, you can click on add object, you can press Ctrl Alt O, or you can right click and go add object. So there's numerous ways of doing the same things. Now you've looked a little bit at this in Catch the Clown, but there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Don't let it scare you too much at the moment. We're going to go through a lot of these features, and each of these tabs has a whole bunch of different actions. Now, the general idea in an object is we've got 3 parts. We've got sort of our properties over here, which is where we put our name, just specify a few little things, have some information. Then we need to add an event, which you should have done already, but you'll see we'll be doing this automatically in a couple of tutorials time. And there's a variety of different events that we can use to create our actions. And then once you have an add event in here, you then drag one of your actions across, and we can make our games do certain things. This is the programming side of the game, and this is the exciting part where I guess we get to be a bit more creative and make all our games do individual and unique things. Now, pretty much not all, but a lot of objects need to be based on a sprite. So if it's an object that does something, it needs to have a picture which is used to represent the object. So we go onto our sprite, and we're going to have Sprite Island 1 is the picture that is going to be used as the basis for whatever we tell this object to do. So we need to name it appropriately as well. So OBJ, which is short for object, underscore island 1. Now if you called it SPR underscore island 1, it would confuse the game and it wouldn't work. So OBJ is short for object island 1. Okay, so here we have our object island 1. Now we want it to be visible, but we don't want our island to be solid, because if it's solid and our plane was flying over it, our plane would probably crash, obviously, into the island. Another thing we need to do is I want you to type into the depth 10,000. Now this, you might have no idea what it means, but that's cool, because I'm going to show you, or whoever your tutorial teacher is going to teach you a little bit about the grid in the next lesson, or this coming up lesson, as well as about depth and layers. The general idea though is that if it's a larger number, it's underneath another object. So for instance, our island is at 10,000 because we want it to be at the very back of our game. Now if we had another object at 1,000, that object appears in front of our island. But if you had your island set, say, at 1,000 and another object set at 2,000, your island object would be therefore in front of your other object. So it's a way of arranging what is the most, I guess, in the forefront of your screen and what things are in the back. So it's a way of arranging layers and creating depth in your game. So I just want you to leave that for the moment. And then we're going to add ourselves our first event. Now you might have done a couple in Create the Clown, but one of the most basic events is the create event. And this is where a lot of our movement actions come from. Now what we need to do is we need to set ourselves a vertical speed. We set ourselves a vertical speed of 2. Now what else have we set at a vertical speed of 2? That was actually our water and our background in our room. So what that's going to mean is when we place our island onto our screen in our room, it's going to move at the same speed as the water, which is exactly what we want it to do. So it looks realistic and the whole background is moving at once. So applies to self just means that this island is moving at a speed of 2. We press OK. Now I want you to press OK, go into your room, You should have seen this in the previous tutorial. And what we have on our left is a list of our objects. At the moment, when you left click, you can see it comes up with Object Island 1. Now what I want you to do is just click that object, or you can make two of them. We click the green tick and we press play. Now what's going to happen is the islands are going to move up at the same speed as the water, or down, sorry. And you can see them moving, but there's a bit of a problem. Now that problem is that those islands, as they move, don't come back. So we place them on the screen and they go past once and it looks realistic, but we want the islands to keep coming. Not only do we want them to keep coming, we want them to come randomly so it doesn't look so fake, so it looks a bit more realistic. So what we need to do is we need to go back into our object and we're going to have to add another couple of events. Okay, the next event that you need to do is a step event. So you click on step and just normal step. And we're going to put a variable in. Now a variable is down here in the control. And I want you to click on the one that's an octagon, not the squares, but the one in the middle. Now you remember you click and you drag this across to make your action happen. Now what a variable is, it's kind of like a rule, like a mathematical rule that we tell the computer, and if that rule works, we get our objects to do something else. So our variable is the y-axis, and as I said, you should have learned a bit about depth on the whiteboard so far, and a bit about the x and y axes and what it is to be using a grid in GameMaker. Now the y just means the y-axis, just like in maths. You've got your x-axis, which is left to right, and your y-axis, which is up and down. Now what we're saying is that on our y-axis, so I'll just open up our main room. You can see this is our x-axis and this one here is our y-axis. So you can see up here that down here this is what the y is. So as I move it up, it gets smaller. So the top up here is 0. As we move down, we get towards the 400 mark. And you can see this is our room. Same with the x-axis. On the left hand side, it's 0, 16. As it moves along, it gets greater and it gets all the way up to 624. Now, so we've got our 640 by 480, which is our entire screen. Now what we're going to be telling our variable to do is that if our island moves past our room height, because this is the height of our room down here, we want the island to jump right back up the top here and then start again. And that way we've only got the one or two islands, but they'll be repeating themselves by looping back up to the top, which we don't see, and coming back down. And not only that, we're going to choose that we want it to come randomly down. So we don't want this island to go down, come back to the top, go down. We want it to come back up to the top, but come down somewhere else randomly. So what I need you to do, so we've got our step event, sorry about that little sidetrack there. We've got our variable that has a value. We said the y for the y-axis, and this is going to be probably your first part of coding, and we type room underscore height. Now what that means is that we're saying our variable is the y-axis, our value is the room height, and we left click on this and it gives you three options: equal to, smaller than, larger than. You will be using this further in some of your games, so you'll see what happens. Now we click on larger than, and what we're saying is that if our object, because remember it's island 1, if island 1 is larger than our room height, so it disappears outside the screen. Now if it disappears, because this is a rule, we want something to happen. Now what we want to happen is we want the island, remember, to jump back up to the top at a random width. And the way we do this is by using the jump command. Now over here, on this one here, I want you to drag this one in. It's called jump to a given position. So we drag that, and we've got a couple of little, boxes to fill out. The first one is the x-axis, and the second one is the y-axis. Now on the x-axis, I want you to write in random room underscore width and then close bracket. Now what this is saying is that, remember, we've got our variable just behind here. If the island moves out of the screen, we want to jump to the top. On the x-axis, we don't really mind where it comes down as long as it's random and it's within the room width. So we don't want it to start coming down outside our screen, because then we wouldn't see it. In the y-axis, I want you to type in -65. Now all that's saying is, remember, the top of our room is 0 on the y-axis, so -65 means it's going to start a little bit above our room, because minus means it goes up. So if this was, I'll show you on our room, we just tick OK, but in our room, you don't need to do this, but just watch. Remember, down here we've got x and y. As we get to the top, it's 0. If we go up here, I know it doesn't say it, but outside our room, anywhere up is negative. So if we say -65, we want our island to appear just above the screen, so it gives it enough time to come down without just randomly appearing somewhere in the middle of our screen. So now what I need you to do is, so we've set ourselves a couple of events. I'll just run through them again. Remember, we've set the vertical speed, placed the island in the room, and then we've also put a step event on it, so if it moves outside the room, it jumps back randomly to the top. Now we just press OK, we click on the green play, run our game, and we'll see if it works. And as you can see, the islands are now jumping back up to the top of the screen and coming down, making the background look more realistic. So we close our game. If this isn't working for you, I suggest you go back through this tutorial and maybe pause it and slow it down and see where you went wrong. Now the last bit of this tutorial, which I want you to do, is do it for all 3 islands. So just what we've done for Object Island 1, you need to repeat for Object Island 2 and Island 3. Remember how to do that? I'll just quickly show you again. We go add an object. We need to base it on a sprite. So this will be Sprite Island 2. We then write object underscore island 2. And remember, we then need to obviously put our events in as well. We've got a create event, and we've got to give it a vertical speed. I'm doing this very quickly, but if you need to, you can slow it down. Vertical speed of 2. As well as that, we've got our step event. We've got ourselves a variable. I'll just make this a little bigger. We've got a variable, and that is y, and our value is our room underscore height. And remember, it's larger than, so if the island moves outside the room, if that happens, we want to jump our island to another position, which is a random room width, and at -65. Then we tick OK, and then we've got our second object. So you can see these are pretty much identical now, except for the little picture. And so I want you to do that for all 3 islands. Once you've done that, you need to put them into the room. So they're probably not to have too many islands, so maybe 2 of each type. And watch what happens now when I left click. There are 2 different islands I can choose from. Now one thing we haven't done, which I just noticed, is you can see the cursor down the middle. It's probably good but to go back into our other islands and just click on the center as well. That's something I didn't do earlier. Oh, that one I did. Okay, so pretty much we then just put some of our other islands in the room. You green tick, you press play, and so once you've got all 3 islands scrolling and reappearing randomly, you've finished this tutorial.